Hello everyone, back at it again in my little gray crawdad. Today we're heading out on a big lake. I guess it's not that big. It's 300 acres, but it's not a puddle. This is my first trip of the year out here. I've been waiting for some warmer temps to raise up that water temperature and some warmer overnight temperatures. I think in the spring the cold overnight temperatures really kill the water temperature. And we had a late snowstorm, and then the snow melt after the snowstorm really knocked things back at least a week. But things are finally warming up. We're pushing 60 degrees. There's some light winds. Right now it's from the north, but they kind of shift around during this trip. But light winds for now, and my plan is to head to the other side of the lake and then work my way back with the wind. It didn't quite work out because the wind was shifting around, but you have to make a plan and just kind of go with it, so that's what I did. And in the spring, I like to focus on the eastern and northeastern shorelines. Sometimes maybe if there's like a stream coming in that runs over land for a while, that can be a good spot too because the water will be a little bit warmer. So that's the plan. Head to the other side of the lake, work my way back with the wind, and fish the eastern and northeastern sides of the pond, see what I can come up with. Alright, I decided to start off throwing a jerkbait. That happens to be a Berkley Stunner. It's a pretty good jerkbait. It has a slow sinking action, which I kind of like early in the spring. I don't want a floating jerkbait that would float away from the fish. They're typically fairly lethargic in the spring. The water's still pretty chilly, but it is warming up. I'm fishing that on a Shimano X-Pride 610 medium. It's a great jerkbait rod. It's got crisp action, but it bends pretty deep in the blank, so it protects light line and light hooks, so you don't pull off fish. If you're going to spend money on a rod, this is the kind of thing that I think you should spend it on. Is something very precise, something that'll pay dividends for years, that kind of a thing. But I didn't feel like I was getting deep enough with this jerkbait. I'm on a deep weed flat here. The weeds aren't really up yet. And I also felt like the color wasn't bright enough. The water's pretty cloudy. So pretty quickly I'm going to move away from this jerkbait and switch to something else. And that is a Megabass 110+1 in the Elegy Bone color. It's got a bright chartreuse belly. It's going to get a little deeper. The water's cloudy because last year, I think it was last year, they treated this pond for weeds with weed killer. And what happened was, right after they put in the weed killer, the water got really cloudy. Probably because all the weeds are dying. So it could be two factors. The weeds are all dying and decomposing, but also there's not as many weeds in here to filter the water. And they really do seem to filter the water more than I would have thought. Anyway, the water is a lot cloudier and dirtier than it normally is. And I wanted something brighter in that dirtier water to stand out. The Megabass 110+1 casts really well. And I'm fishing it with kind of hard jerks and maybe 8-10 second pauses, maybe a little bit less. I'm really using it as a search bait, so I'm fishing it a little bit faster than I would in colder winter water, say, for example. So I worked my way along with the deep diving jerkbait, the Megabass 110+1, and I'm getting closer to the shoreline now. Inch by inch, we're getting there. There's not a lot of wind. That's another kind of situation where I like a jerkbait. A lot of times they'll shy off other baits like chatterbaits, spinnerbaits, even cranks if there's no wind, but they'll still hit a jerkbait pretty well. And I got my first fish. Seemed like a little bit deeper diving depth, and the brighter color made the difference. And I'm going to get him in the net before he pulls off. And it's a start. It's not a bad one, actually. It's not huge or anything, but maybe about 2 pounds or so. Those 3 trebles get all over the net, all over the fish, but I'll get him off without too much trouble. Oop, another hook stuck him. The Megabass hooks aren't the greatest, but they're okay. And for $25, I just fish for them, or whatever I paid for this, $20. I just fish them until they break or bend out, and then I start replacing them. They are plenty sharp. They're just not very durable or strong. It's a thin wire, and they tend to be kind of brittle hooks, so they break. Sometimes they break when their fish are rolling in the net. Sometimes they break on the hook set. Sometimes they just break for no reason. But it's a pretty good jerkbait. Alright, this is a few casts later. I'm working along this eastern shoreline. I got boats going by me, boat wakes. And I'm working that jerkbait a little bit shallower now than I was when I was way out in the middle. Trying to put together some kind of a pattern. If I could get an idea just where the bass are located, I can come back through with other baits and see if I can catch them a little bit better or more efficiently. And there's another one. He's a little smaller. He's not going to win any prizes, but I'm putting together a pattern. And these last 2 fish were actually a little bit more shallow than I expected. Yeah, he's all right. Take anything this time of year. Here's a closer look at that jerkbait. The 110+1 has a deep diving lip, but the hook tie is still on the nose of the bait. And that elegy bone is like a herringbone with a blue back and a chartreuse belly. It's a pretty bright color. So I fished around with the jerkbait for a while, and I really couldn't replicate the same pattern, but at least I had an idea where the fish were kind of located, and they're relatively shallow. And sometimes right after fish go off being on jerkbaits and blade baits in the spring, the next hard bait they'll eat is a flat-sided crank. So I put on a Little John MD. It's a ½ ounce, I think. Little John crankbait, except it has the medium diving lip. That's what MD stands for. And so it gets a little bit deeper. I'm kind of in that 110+1 range for depth. And I can feel myself ticking some old dead weeds down at the bottom, and then I break free, and that fish ate it as I broke free. So that's a pretty handy little piece of information to know. Right, so now I know I can catch them shallow and I can catch them cranking. And cranking, I can cover so much more water. Typically, what I'm going to be doing is reeling it down until I hit the tops of some old weeds like I just did there, and then pop it free. And I got another one, and he ate it right after I popped it free of the weeds. The Little John MD isn't the most weedless bait, but I'm getting away with it because it's early spring and the weeds aren't really up yet. He's a little bit smaller, but I'm just trying to come up with a pattern here, and maybe a couple patterns that I can run around the lake with later on. Yeah, he's a little guy. Thanks for playing, bud. All right, in spots where that Little John MD was diving a little bit too deep, I tried some other cranks just to see if they would hit him. And one of those was Strike King Hybrid Hunter Jr. So it's the same rod, same line, everything. I just have a little snap on the end. It's number 2 decoy egg snap, so I can run through cranks pretty quickly. If the depth changes, the wind changes, if I want to try a square bill instead of a flat side or whatever. And I got one on the Strike King Hybrid Hunter. But they didn't seem to like it as much as that Little John MD. And it could have been a depth thing, or it could have been the flat side versus kind of rounded sides. Sometimes that stuff's important in the spring. Alright, I'm back to a section that has a little bit more depth. And I don't have any electronics on the crawdad right now. I'm just looking at the shoreline basically and then seeing if my crankbait hangs up in weeds or not. But when you get into a shoreline, you can see the houses are a little bit of a hill there. It's hard to see on camera. But a little bit more of a hill, I can fish that deeper diving crank and not get hung up in the weeds. I want to just tick the tops of the old weeds. And I don't know if you saw in the video, but I popped it free of some old weeds and that fish was all over it. And that's exactly what I want. I want to tick the tops of old weeds, but not get buried in weeds and buried in leaves and buried in, I don't know, sticks or whatever else is on the bottom there. And be able to fish clean, but still contact structure or weeds or whatever. Hey, he's not bad. Maybe a little better there. We're getting there. We're getting there. Alright, you can see just a little bit of the slope into the water that continues on into the water, underwater, which means I can stick with that Little John MD crank, fishing a little bit deeper water next to the shore. The Little John MD has like a tungsten ball in it, but it's rubberized. It's coated with rubber, so it has kind of a deeper thud. It's not exactly a one knocker or like a rattling bait, like a rattle trap. It has a thud to it, and I don't know if it's the flat sides or the thud or the color, but for whatever reason, the fish seem to dig it on this day. A little bit better there, maybe. I don't know, 2.5, maybe 3 pounds. But I'm figuring out a pattern. There it is. That's called the green pumpkin color. Comes with round bend hooks, but I put some triple grips on it. It's got an orange belly, which I like this time of year in the spring. And it could be a crawfish, or it could be like a perch or a bluegill. I'm not really sure what the fish think it is, but they think it's food. Alright, I'm going to show you the setup I was fishing with. It's an 8-to-1 reel, 30-pound braid with a 12-pound mono leader. And the rod is a Shimano Intenza. I feel like for cranking, if you're going to skimp or go down a few notches in terms of like reel quality, cranking's probably the area to do it in. So that's kind of a lower end rod. Certainly not an X-Pride or a Zodius or a Corrado. You know, so I'm 3 or 4 levels down in price. And if you can get it on sale, you can get a pretty good deal. Alright, I'm into some shallower water again. I need a different crank. I tried throwing that Rocco a little bit, but the Rocco was giving me trouble. Those balsa baits, sometimes they get out of tune or they blow out more easily than some of the plastic ones. So I'm switching to a Yozuri crank. I think it's the 3DB series, chartreuse perch, something like that. But you can see the slope of the lawns, etc., going into the water. It's shallower now, and that shallower depth carries on underneath the water. So I know I need the shallower running crankbait. I can't fish with that Little John MD anymore. And I'm just running through a few other crankbaits to see what they're going to hit, if anything. Because I think in my head it's a little early for square bills. I think they really prefer a flat side. But you know what? Every once in a while, you get lucky. And that one ate it pretty well. Get him in the net before I lose him. He's not bad. I'm kind of happy to be done with jerkbait fishing for a bit. If I can catch them on cranks, that's what I'll do. Just a lot more efficient. I can cover a lot more water. And I can try to avoid catching a lot of pickerel. It's easier for me to throw. And it's a lot of fun. Alright, I'm going to keep working my way down this bank. I was only out here for about 2 hours on this trip. I didn't have a lot of time. but I was really happy with the way things turned out. I felt like I broke down the bite pretty well. I got a couple on a jerkbait and a bunch more on a crank, and I feel like that's a pattern that I can duplicate. And next time when I come out, I probably won't throw the jerkbait at all. I'll probably just go straight for that flat-sided crank, and maybe have a few more cranks on the deck too, and go from there. All right, thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. I'll list everything in the video description, just like all my other videos. And I'll catch you on the next one. See ya!